Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Micah Kotch. I have the privilege of moderating this session on the future of green tech. Thanks so much to Steve and everyone at the New York City Media Lab. I run UrbanX, which is the accelerator for startups reimagining city life. Over the last 5 years, we've built a portfolio of 70 companies who are working to make cities more efficient, more livable, more enjoyable. And today we have 3 amazing entrepreneurs working on transportation, on food, on energy. And we're gonna have a conversation about decarbonization, about climate policy, about entrepreneurship and technology commercialization, and about real solutions that are being developed both here in New York and beyond. And I'm joined by Jaime Waydo, who's CTO at Cavnue, Viraj Puri, who's the CEO at Gotham Greens, and my old friend Adler, who's the VP of Marketing at Sealed. I'm going to have them each introduce themselves and talk just a little bit about what their company does and how they think about their solutions role in combating the climate crisis. So, Allie.
All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks, Micah. Always fun to do these kinds of things together. I'm Allie, everyone. I'm the VP of Marketing at Sealed. Sealed's on a mission to make homes healthier, more comfortable, and cleaner for the planet. So we've come up with a unique financing and concierge service model to make upgrading to efficient electric heating and cooling easy and affordable. We modernize home heating and cooling with upgrades like insulation and HVAC technology. And we match the right contractor, cover the upfront costs, and stand behind the work. We actually only get paid if your house saves energy. I've been at Sealed for 6 years. My career in clean energy and climate has spanned over a decade in roles across government, nonprofit, and entrepreneurship ecosystem development. And the reason I'm at Sealed is because I'm very passionate about solving the climate crisis. And 20% of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States come from our homes. And there is a massive opportunity to solve this problem with technology that's already available today. Technology like insulation, air source heat pumps, which are 3 times more efficient than traditional HVAC. And the biggest problem we have is an adoption problem. It would currently take 500 years to retrofit all of the nation's housing stock to decarbonize it if we did it at the current pace. So, for context, 20% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. is the equivalent of the entire country of Germany. And so, that is how we are contributing towards solving this problem. We're just, point blank on a mission to take every home off of fossil fuel heat.
Awesome. Thank you, Allie. Viraj, let's have you introduce yourself and Gotham Greens.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Great to see you. I co-founded Gotham Greens a little over 10 years ago and serve as the company's CEO. We are a mission-driven consumer fresh food company, really working at the nexus of technology, supply chain innovation, and fresh food. So what we do is we design, develop, and operate high-tech, climate-controlled greenhouses for fresh vegetable production. And then we take those vegetables and other value-added food products and sell them to supermarkets using our brand name. And I really came to this industry looking to innovate and disrupt the conventional fresh food production and supply chain. Agriculture is one of the, it is the largest consumer of land on the planet. It's the largest consumer of fresh water on the planet. Approximately 70% of the world's fresh water withdrawals go toward agriculture. And agriculture is responsible for about 30% of global carbon emissions. It's the leading source of global water pollution. And so what we do is we're really an applied technology company, right? So we're applying this technologically robust, commercially viable indoor farming technology to basically grow produce using a fraction of the land compared to conventional farming, a fraction of the fresh water. So we can grow a head of lettuce using 2 gallons of water versus 50 gallons of water that it takes to grow a head of lettuce in the field. And we're able to do so with minimal chemical inputs and no runoff and no sort of water pollution. And then finally, in terms of the supply chain disruption and innovation, we're growing this fresh produce in cities in close proximity to large population centers, as opposed to having to transport product thousands of miles from field to fork, where there's an enormous amount of waste in the supply chain, enormous amount of carbon emissions. And then finally, we're really trying to tell this story to our consumers in a sort of a branded consumer way.
That is awesome. I am a huge fan of Gotham Greens. Every time that I pass by the Whole Foods on 3rd and 3rd, it puts a big smile on my face. And you'd be pleased to know that your butter lettuce is my daughter's favorite lettuce, and pretty much the only lettuce that she will eat.
So good. I'm also a huge fan.
Love the endorsements and the testimonials. I appreciate it, guys.
There you go. The lettuce that kids will eat. Jaime, let's have you introduce yourself and Cavnue.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Jaime. I'm the CTO at Cavnue. Cavnue was founded just a little over a year ago, so we're a super baby startup, and we're really focused on building the roads of the future. So as the world is starting to move into more connected vehicles, semi-autonomous and autonomous vehicles, how do we build roads that enable that technology to happen sooner and happen at a scale where we can give mobility to everybody, no matter what their income or ability to drive is. We also think a lot about the cities that we go into and how do we design roads where we can enable a much better ecosystem for pedestrians and cyclists. And we believe that when you take roads and you actually modernize them and you make the technology work, you can reduce greenhouse emissions by 17% by just making the cars drive more efficiently. We also work to electrify the roads, putting in charging networks to be able to really support the move towards electric vehicles that's happening in the country. So a lot going on. My personal story and the why I went to Cavnue and founded Cavnue was my dad has Parkinson's disease. And he lives in rural Montana where you can't just call an Uber if you want to go somewhere. And so I really started working on autonomous vehicles to make sure that people like him will be able to have mobility when they start running out of the ability to drive themselves. And so Cavnue is a way to do that and do that at a scale. Before Cavnue, I was the chief engineer at Apple and at Waymo, working on autonomous system technology.
Yeah, what a great story, and amen to that use case. In the conversation around autonomous, so many people, I think, generally neglect senior populations and young people and those with disabilities. So really interesting that you started out with that personal connection to the issue. I want to stick with you, Jaime, for a minute, just because I think you operate at such an interesting point between the public and the private sector. And I'm curious to know, like, given that we're still in the thick of COVID, and also that I think, extreme weather events have really entered the national conscious in an entirely new way in 2021. And it feels like there's some momentum around policy change finally emanating from DC. How do you think about this kind of evolving ecosystem shift around the public and private sector?
Yeah, I think this is just the right time in history where the federal government is very interested in putting a lot of money, about 6 times the kind of money that they normally put into infrastructure, with the Biden's transportation bill, Biden's infrastructure bill, and a bunch of that money, hundreds of millions of dollars, is being given to the states to go towards fixing infrastructure. So there's a big public push to do that from the government side. On the private side, people are starting to realize that the best way to work on congestion is actually to manage the lanes and to start doing dynamic pricing and start doing dynamic speed limits, controlled access, reversing the direction of lanes from morning to night. And all of that requires technology. And so we're at a really beautiful spot in Cavnue where we can leverage those 2 inflection points. So the density of throughput in roads has doubled in the last 30 years, and yet the infrastructure is crumbling. There's this huge investment in autonomous technology. Over 80 billion has been put into it. And so Cavnue really tries to sit at that intersection and say, we can put together what the federal government is trying to do in infrastructure and modernize the roads and make them more durable for the future. We can sit with the autonomous technology providers, with the car manufacturers and so on, and say, we know how to build roads that are going to help you. And we can sit with the tech companies and say, we know how to take your technology and integrate it. And so we can put all three of those together in a way that I think is going to really transform how people get to travel on roads in the future.
That's awesome. So such an interesting time in this space. Allie, I want to come to you for your take on that same question, given that you are working with consumers, but also with utilities, and then with kind of quasi-public agencies like New York Green Bank. What's your take on kind of this mix of public and private sector resources and initiatives around real movement to climate adaptation and mitigation?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think it's a really important topic to discuss, because it is, I think a lot of times things are talked about around this topic of like, it's the government has to solve this problem. And in reality, like, the government alone cannot solve this problem. It has to be done through public-private partnership, in my view. I came out of government. I worked in the state of Massachusetts under Deval Patrick. And, there are a lot of government initiatives to try to overcome the barriers to, adoption, that 500-year problem I talked about earlier of how long it would take to decarbonize our housing stock. And, the way I see the market is really the biggest barriers to accelerating adoption. And when it comes to decarbonizing housing are three things. Number one, consumer education and awareness. Number two, upfront costs. And number three, the complexity and difficulty of just the process of getting the work done. And the government alone cannot solve these barriers. Governments can do consumer education and awareness initiatives. They will often offer rebates and incentives, either directly or through utilities. But those rebates are not enough to overcome the full upfront costs of the comprehensive home retrofits that are required in order to solve this problem, right? Like, the rebate programs that were designed for utilities for energy efficiency were designed for light bulbs and thermostats primarily, not to cover the cost of a $10,000 to $60,000 comprehensive home retrofit. So what you need then is you need innovative financing mechanisms that can help overcome those barriers to upfront costs, and also, frankly, create business models that can afford to do the massive amount of consumer education and awareness that's required to move the market. And so, that's how we've come at the problem, is to create this innovative financing product, which is based on actual home energy saving performance. And then we partner with, a government entity, the New York Green Bank, which has, taken the risk on a new financing model and made it possible to de-risk. So there's like a lot of back and forth where government can help new business models come to market, and then together, combined between the incentives and the funding that government can provide with those innovative financing models, you can overcome some of those barriers to adoption and to awareness. And so, I think it really takes both players to make that happen. And we couldn't do it alone. We partner with every utility in New York State. That's how we got our start in the market.
Right. Like, the financial innovation is not necessarily enough. You
do need
the customer education. Yeah.
It's a lot easier when you have those backers, when you're a new financial product no one's ever heard of, to be able to point to the fact that you are backed by the state of New York and you partner with every utility in the state of New York and build that brand credibility, so that then, as you enter new markets and maybe you don't have those same kind of partnerships, but you now have a brand that people can trust.
Yes. So we have a question from Jerry, and I want to encourage the audience to ask Q&A. You can put them either in the chat or in the Q&A box. We want to make this interactive for you all. And Allie, we're going to ask you this question about Passive House. I remember hosting the first Passive House meetup, my God, in New York, and it was like 2008, 2009. At the Varick Street Incubator, and Passive House has really kind of taken off. So you want to talk a little bit about how you think about Passive House from a retrofit or upgrade, and I would assume in most cases from a new construction perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say off the bat that, passive house is like a gold standard for that you can strive for. It's very challenging to accomplish that through a retrofit. And we have 135 million houses already in the United States, that many of which still need to be retrofitted, the large majority of which still need to be retrofitted. And so, we come at this angle from the perspective of, we need to first tackle the, getting the existing housing stock retrofitted with, at least insulation and heat pump technology, which could reduce their energy use by 60% when combined, right? That is where we start. And for people who are building new construction, I think that it makes a lot of sense to build it right. But the problem we have is that we've already built the majority of the housing stock that the country has, and it was built without consideration for the environment or frankly for the comfort of the occupant. And so we're really just trying to tackle the root of the problem and focus on the biggest opportunity that exists today that needs to be addressed very, very quickly. I guess we're not trying to let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Amen. Viraj, I want to ask you, as a 10-year-old startup, what's worked really well for you and what hasn't when it comes to deals with incumbents and legacy companies? You're obviously working with Whole Foods, but other distributors, what's worked really well for you? And maybe you're brave enough to share what has not worked well for you.
We've taken an approach from day one to it's a delicate balance of trying to sort of disrupt. May I use that word? I know it's a word that gets used a lot in the startup world, to disrupt something, but also work with them, right? So produce is a very grocery and food and produce is a very institutional, antiquated, world in which there's a lot of historical relationships and know-how of how things have been done. And so while we are offering an extremely, different supply chain to grow by growing the product in such close proximity, we still have to use distributors and food service providers to get that product to the end consumer. So we're really trying to work with different stakeholders to ensure that it's a win-win proposition for them as well. So for example, with supermarket retailers, approximately 10 to 15% of what they buy in terms of perishables are actually thrown away by them, right? That meat department, that seafood department, dairy department, produce department, when they buy products from vendors, they're not buying those products on consignment, right? They're trying to buy just enough, but it's very difficult to reconcile that with demand. You could have, more footfalls in a store on a given day. You could have snowy and rainy weather, less people go shopping, and then all those jugs of milk that have the enjoy-by date of tomorrow suddenly have to get tossed away, right? So our value proposition to the retailer was, look, if we can actually extend the shelf life because we're growing product much closer to you, maybe you'll have less spoilage in your supply chain, which is only going to help in your bottom line, right? So that's one example. And that did come to pass, right? So our products enjoy almost 100% sell-through rate. So that's additional margin that the retailers can sort of get. So, what started off with Whole Foods is now, relationships with Kroger, Target, Albertsons, many of the nation's largest retailers. Cisco, US Foods were two of the nation's largest food service providers. So we probably came across as very radical when we started in 2011 in Brooklyn, but now we have 9 greenhouses across the US. We're in New York, California, Texas, Colorado, Maryland, Rhode Island, Illinois, among others. And so we've really tried to work with the incumbents as much as possible. And I'll give you one more anecdotal example is, when we started this business, it was all about disrupting the centralized supply chain of produce coming out of California, right? California was, the way things were done. That's where all the water is being used and all the, unfair labor practices. And that's the area that's facing all this climate risk. So we're trying to decentralize production and get it out of California. Fast forward 10 years later, we just opened our newest greenhouse in California. 10 years ago, that would be the last place where I thought we would actually build a greenhouse. But the reasons for that are, California is the home to the agricultural industry. That's where the most amount of research institutions are. That's where all the vendors are, the seed breeders, the nutrient suppliers, all the produce buyers for all the major grocery chains are based there. So we figured if we're going to help change the industry and evolve the industry, why not do it from within? Why not actually be a stakeholder from that system? So we actually bought land from the University of California, Davis, And we've co-located our greenhouse next to the campus, and we're going to be working with the university on research, development, and as well as developing a pipeline of talent, of graduates who can come work in this growing industry now of indoor agriculture. So yeah, we're firm believers in trying to change things, but also work with the incumbents to make the most impact as possible.
We have a question from the audience for you, Viraj, on like where you are on the cost curve, and from a unit economics perspective, like how can you drop the price? Will we ever see, $2 lettuce from Gotham Greens in the supermarket, or is there just not enough margin because from a cost perspective, you just won't be able to drop it that low?
Yeah, no, margins have been improving over time with more economies of scale, more automation, more technology. We're just getting better at what we do. When we started selling product, a typical product of ours would be $4. Now it's closer to $3. And we're actually reaching price parity in turn. When you look at delivered cost, wholesale cost of a product to a supermarket on the East Coast, we now have price parity compared to a product that's grown in the field in California, where, by the way, the farm gate price only gets a fraction of it, because then the product is sold to several middlemen along the way who process the product, pack the product, send it to a third-party distributor, then a fourth-party distributor. So by the time all those middlemen take their margin along the way, the actual delivered cost of the product to the supermarket is the same as our delivered cost. It is true that our cost of production today is a little bit more expensive, but once you factor in that we have very little logistics and freight rates, we're actually able to reach price parity with many of the national brands that you'll find today.
Awesome. Jaime, I want to talk a little bit about fundraising. I think that we have some audience members who are startups and founders and who are probably on their own fundraising journey. You are in the middle of a fundraise. Can you help the audience kind of understand how your capital raise process has been going, how you built relationships with your investors, how you think about those relationships, and then if you can also maybe just talk about the shift that we've seen is like clean tech has rebranded to climate tech, and climate tech has gotten really sexy and attracted like $16 billion of investment in the first 2 quarters of 2021. What's been your experience, and how has that process worked for you?
Yeah, I think I'll tell you how we did it, and we're making it up. We're a year old, so we're making it up. But we started by really focusing on who do we want to anchor our round, and we focused on who is a company or an investor that we think brings a lot strategically to the mission that we're on, and to filling out our board with another voice that would be really important. And so we went and talked to a couple of people, not very many, and really figured out who that anchor was going to be. And then once we got the anchor signed, then we said, okay, this is a strategic round for us. And so as we think about our company, we sit at the intersection of transportation and technology and vehicles. And so where do we want to pull in investments, and who would be the ideal companies that represent kind of those 3 big sectors? And so we've created a list of those. My co-founder and I, between the 2 of us, he comes out of transportation, and I come out of vehicles and tech. And so we've got a lot of relationships. And so we've called those people and really focused on, just talking to people, telling people our story, telling people what we think the vision is. We've been really clear on having a lot of analysis that shows the benefits, and then showing, so being very clear on what's the vision, what do we build, how does this make money, how does it reach scale, and why should you care? And so we were very clear on that. And then we basically just call our friends that are in places that could do an investment or do an introduction to an investment. And we just tell them our story. And then the doors keep opening and we keep just building interest from there. So I don't know if that's normal or not, but that's how we're doing it and approaching it.
Yeah, I mean, I think a focus on the fundamentals, and I love to hear the part about how will this actually make money, since it seems like that's kind of fallen out of fashion in 2021. But I do think also, treating it like a process, right? So like at UrbanX, we've had about 80% of our teams have gone on to raise their next round of capital. And I think that part of that is because founders treat raising money like a sales process. Yeah. And generally we said, look, like, you'll probably have to have 100 meetings to close your round. And so really being thoughtful and having all of those different elements within the narrative nailed down and treating it like a process, I think is a recipe for success. Viraj, I'm curious to know if you have anything to add to that answer.
Yeah, it's all about finding, investors that are aligned with what you're doing, right? Early on, we met with a lot of and I know that sounds cliched, it almost sounds obvious, but we received term sheets from venture capital investors, early on in our days, and we realized pretty early on that that's not the right type of investor for us, right? We're not, going to be this exponential, explosive growth business, right? With this hockey stick growth, so to speak. It's a capital intensive business. It's manufacturing. And we're not manufacturing widgets, we're manufacturing plants, right? It's so having a more longer term patient capital investor, perhaps investors who understand infrastructure, understand the time horizon of investing in infrastructure. Other types of impact investors who maybe care about the triple bottom line approach, which now is called ESG investing, right? So, long story short is I think one really has to find investors whose investment mandates match what your business plan is and your business plan trajectory. We've been fortunate that we've been able to attract a lot of debt financing, low-cost debt financing that's non-dilutive, it's non-equity-based financing, because we're building so much infrastructure, plant, equipment, machinery, right? So if we can get debt terms then that are attractive with a lower cost of capital compared to equity, then that's going to make more sense for us. So it's and this was an education, right? I learned a lot from our CFO, who's our co-founder, but also, talking to bankers, advisors, other mentors within the industry, you get a sense of, hey, that could be a really flashy name of an investor, right? That everyone recognizes, but that may not be the right investor for you, right? And that may make for a bad marriage. So finding someone who's really in line with your growth goals as well, I think and pace of growth, I think is really important.
Yeah, I just want to echo like what Viraj is saying. There's a lot of temptation, I think, early in a company to just take money. And I think being really selective about who do you want to get married to, because it is a marriage, and finding your no for this investor is not right for us, and being willing to turn away money, I think serves you a lot in the future. So I echo what you say, Viraj. I think it's smart.
I want to turn the lens to New York City, given that it's the New York City Media Labs Summit, and I feel like I would be doing a disservice to the city if we didn't at least talk a little bit about New York. So, Ali, I'm going to start with you on this one. How do you think about the role of Sealed in its contribution to the city's post-COVID economic recovery? And do you have experience in working with other cities or utilities who are also kind of thinking about linking economic recovery with decarbonization and the fight against climate change? You're muted, by the way, Ali. Sorry, you're muted.
I said I'll answer the question, but I'm going to define city broadly because Sealed primarily services, areas just outside the city. So, metro area is where I can speak to best for our particular business. All their great sister businesses that are focusing on like the city center, like Block Power, which does like more multifamily and urban housing stock. I'll just speak to economic recovery and economic opportunity. One of the biggest challenges to scaling the home decarbonization industry is that the availability of qualified installers for the technology is actually relatively low. And this has been a big focus of NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, building out workforce training and workforce development programs for this industry. But in order to retrofit our nation's housing stock, we are going to have to create a lot of jobs. There are, we could put an entire truck, a crew on the road with 10 retrofits in a month. So, do the math, 160 million homes. That's a lot. That's a lot of trucks. And so, the biggest opportunity is figuring out how to scale demand as quickly as possible and time that well with building that workforce. And so, we're already working closely with our own contractor partners as we scale and as we grow our business to help them then grow their capacity and grow their availability to service those customers. And, we'll continue to do that, not just in New York, but in metro areas all over the country eventually.
Viraj, I'll ask you the same question, given your footprint here in New York.
New York is, I don't know, I think it's a fantastic place to start a business and grow a business. It's a challenging place. I think it forces you to be really efficient. I think it forces you to be good at what you do, and otherwise someone else is going to eat your lunch, right? I mean, it's obviously a cliche that, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. But I do think that there's truth in that cliche. It's a very challenging market. I mean, for us, from a actual physical infrastructure standpoint, getting our first greenhouse, our real proof of concept prototype that we launched in Brooklyn in 2011, getting that designed, permitted, and built was not for the faint of heart, right? Going through the bureaucracy of the city, going through the bureaucracy of the power companies to get your utilities and connect to a sewer line and all the rest of it was incredibly challenging, but yet we were rewarded. The perseverance got us, a front page article in the New York Times and, global media and this fan following, and then just a lot of positive notoriety, right, in terms of marketing, public relations, and all the rest of it. And New York is a global brand. Brooklyn is a global brand. I mean, we use Gotham is obviously a nickname for New York City, and it's in our name, and we believe that's provided a halo effect and a cachet that's helped us grow our brand and our business, not just in the United States, but provide us with some sort of a thought leadership status in this industry. More specifically, we've also worked with NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, on a grant to really do research and development on how the carbon impact of growing produce in New York, albeit with heating and cooling and different types of systems, could actually be superior from a natural resource consumption compared to product that's grown out in California but then trucked in a refrigerated truck 3,000 miles away to reach New York, excuse me. So we've partnered with NYSERDA, we've partnered with New York City, we've partnered with State University of New York, City University of New York. We've had mayors, come to our greenhouses and support our workforce development programs. So I think New York is an amazing place. It's obviously such a rich, diverse place with just people who are so good at their fields. So whether it's, if to speak for my colleagues on this panel here, if we can get good retrofits of houses done in New York, other cities will follow, right? And so on and so forth. And I truly believe that. So proud to be a New Yorker, proud to have started the business here and now kind of exported it to
yeah. I'll just piggyback off of what Viraj just said, which is that, for Sealed as well, starting in New York and starting our business in New York State, it was very much, the right place for us to start our business. And we were very much in the right place at the right time with the New York Reforming the Energy Vision initiative that kicked off about 5 or 6 years ago at this point. The thought leadership that New York State and New York City have had on initiatives to encourage innovation in decarbonization is leading. New York is one of the leading states, if not the leading state in the country on this front. And it's one of the reasons that Sealed was able to build a thriving business starting in New York State. And so, I give a lot of props to New York, and I agree that, starting here is a great place to start.
I just want to put in a quick plug for a nonprofit that I sit on the board of called Green City Force, which is an AmeriCorps program that really operates at the intersection of economic, environmental, and racial justice. It trains 18 to 24-year-olds who live in public housing for careers in the green economy. And we actually have 5 farms on 4 different boroughs that sit in NYCHA developments, where pre-COVID, the unemployment rate, if you were 18 to 24-year-old, was 72%, which is a striking figure. But training for careers in things like energy efficiency and in farming and in electric vehicle charging and things of that nature. So tremendous need, I think, in particular for New Yorkers who live in public housing, but particularly for those Black and brown communities to participate in the promise of this shift to a clean energy economy. I think we might have time for just a couple of more questions. I'm going to, by the way, Jerry, it's not a rooftop, it's actually like in the ground. And if you go to greencityforce.org, you can learn more. So maybe a question for all 3 of you. What's your advice for aspiring founders in the audience? What's the biggest need? Where do you see white space or opportunity? What has served you well in your journey? And maybe Jaime, we'll start with you.
I think in the technology space, there's 3 big frontiers that I see. One is energy, one is transportation, and one is healthcare. And so I think building technology that innovates in one of those 3 areas, I think there's a lot of white space or greenfield, depending on how you talk about it. And so, I encourage folks to think about the innovation and the disruption there, because I think there's a lot needed. I think there's a lot of impact that can happen. The other thing for me is always trying to build a product that people want, even if they haven't asked for it, but really focusing on like, what's your story and why do people care? And if you can build something amazing that people want, then I feel like it's just such an easier path than trying to convince people that they want some fancy widget that maybe they don't actually want, or that's cool, but, isn't going to actually fundamentally create impact. So that would be my advice.
Can I just follow up on that very quickly, Jaime? So where do you come down, and I think I know how you're going to answer this, but like technology innovation versus business model innovation. So you laid out kind of those 3 areas of where you see, white space.
For me, I'm a technologist. Thank God my co-founder is the business brain in our relationship. So for me, I think a lot about where's the technology innovation. I do think in healthcare, I think a lot too about like ecosystems where there's just a lot of baton passing. So travel, like in an airport, all of the different logistics and hoops you have to jump through to get on an airplane, like disruption there is sorely needed. Or in healthcare, like health records is a disaster. Why can't you have your health record on your phone? And then no matter where you go, it's with you. Like, why is the healthcare record a piece of paper in a hospital somewhere that's being stored? That's nuts. And so I do think a lot about processes and efficiencies on that side. On the business side, I think that there's better minds thinking about that should answer that question.
I have opinion on this topic.
Go ahead, Ali.
So, I am a marketer, so I get very excited about go-to-market. And, I honestly, in energy, if you think about the delivery model that has existed in the energy space, and energy is the primary driver behind climate solutions in particular, the business model that's been the driver behind delivery in this space is 100 years old and has no competition and no incentive to change. And there was a question we were asked to prepare for about, competition. A healthy competition is good. And so, there hasn't been a lot of competition around go to market and how you deliver these solutions. There's a lot of great technology out there to solve our climate and environmental challenges. I don't see enough entrepreneurs working on business model innovation to get that technology to market. I think it is one of the most urgent imperatives for people to tackle. And my advice, whether you decide to go the technology route or the business model innovation route, obviously I've picked my poison on that front, is just, 3 things: hire great people, hire great people, hire great people. Nothing else will matter in the end. In the beginning, your idea can be great. You can be an all-star executor yourself. That's going to get you through the first 2 years of your business, maybe. And what I've learned is that is the difference between winning and losing. It's just the people. It's your people.
Awesome. Viraj, speaking of...
I can't follow up with that.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely well said there. Look, I think I want to give consumers and general people more credit, and not to say anyone's not giving them credit, but I think this is also a cliche. Like, if people can spend with their dollars, then you can make change. And I don't think we would have started this business 11 years ago if we weren't seeing a rapid shift in consumer behavior around supporting making food purchasing decisions around natural resource use, sustainability, this growing popularity of farmers markets, farm to table restaurants, this whole farm to fork movement, because a lot of the technology that we use, while it's evolved immensely over the last few years in terms of data science and sensors and climate control capabilities within our greenhouses, as well as automation, robotic arms, seeding and harvesting and performing all these tasks in the greenhouse. Putting that aside, the whole concept of greenhouses has been around for over 50 years, right? The problem is that it wasn't being deployed on a wide scale. And then finally, consumers didn't really care, right? When I was in college, not so long ago, I'm dating myself 20 years ago, people didn't care where their food was coming from. Now you can't go to a college campus and get like, there's free range this, pasture range this, locally sourced this. Every university's got a farm on campus now, and all these types of things. So I think innovating with the consumer, talking to the consumer, understanding what they want, because they're going to make ideas successful or not, right? So I think is really important. So understanding, the consumer behavior, how you can meet their needs, I think is incredibly important to really inspire change.
Preach.
Yeah. So very last question. So just building on that, Viraj, give us a sense, like when you think about your roadmap and you think about the next 5 years, what does that look like for Gotham Greens? And I guess based on, staying close to the customer and really anticipating consumer needs. And as you interpret these different trend lines, what does it mean for Gotham Greens if we reconvene here for the Media Lab Summit in 2026?
Hopefully a lot of sustainable growth, continue to build our business incrementally, but capture more of the market share. I think there's just so many, headwinds facing the incumbent industry. Like take lettuce, for example, which is where we derive the most amount of our revenue. It's a $15 billion category in the US and Canada, and 98% of that production comes from 2 growing regions, one in California and one in Arizona. So highly centralized. And those are both desert places that are facing severe water shortage, right? And there's a lot of other headwinds, right? Climate-related risks, wildfires, the reliance on migrant farm workers, the high cost of freight, and all these types of things. So, and then coupled with that, you have all these sort of tailwinds around consumers increasingly wanting to buy local, support local brands, incorporate more health and wellness and quality fruits and vegetables into their diets. If you combine all of that, there's an enormous market opportunity. We want to go after that market opportunity. There's room for multiple winners. It's a great space. We want to see more climate resilient, resource efficient farming proliferate around the world. It's not just about Gotham Greens. It's about really advancing this form of farming. And so 5 years from now, we have 800,000 square feet of greenhouse today. 5 years from now, we want to have 4 to 5 million square feet of greenhouse, right? So we have 9 greenhouses in 6 states. We'd love to be at 20 greenhouses in 15 states. So hopefully that's the conversation we're having a couple of years from now.
That's awesome. Jaime, how about for you? Where will the Michigan project be 5 years from now, and for Cavnue at large?
Yeah, we've got an amazing project that we're working on in Michigan. That's a network of the first Cavnue connected corridor lanes. So I hope in 5 years they're open. People are using them. That it's created a entirely new model of transportation where we can create that public transportation that's easy for people, that actually like picks them up and drops them off closer to their homes, gets them to destinations that they care about. that I think enables this autonomous technology, and that, you know, people are getting around more efficiently, safer, and having more comfortable experiences when they're on the road. I also want to see us build it into the cities in a really thoughtful way, where it's integrated with pedestrians and cyclists. And so we're actually making it easier for you to not have to drive a car everywhere, and make it so that cyclists have their own dedicated space, pedestrians have their own dedicated space, so that we can create cities that are for everybody and every form of transportation that they want.
Awesome. Allie, I think you have the last word on this. What's the vision for Sealed 5 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, 5 years from now, I would hope that Sealed is available in every major metropolitan area in the United States, at least the ones that have variable climates. It's good for us where it's very hot or very cold or both. And, you know, really ultimately, we've been talking about this a lot internally. You know, what we need for clean home retrofits is a center of gravity that makes it easy for people to not only choose to retrofit their home clean, but to, you know, activate inactive buyers as well as intercept otherwise buyers of dirty home technology. So, you know, our vision is to create a platform that is a game-changing experience that, you know, not only it's really an experience that of buying a home heating and cooling retrofit that no one has seen in this space today. And, you know, I believe that one of the biggest movers in this, in the energy space especially, is transforming what is otherwise a terrible customer experience into a great one. I think that may be the difference between us hitting our goals and not. And so our vision is to create that.
Awesome. Well, this was a super fun 45 minutes, as I knew that it would be. And really appreciate the audience's engagement. No, we didn't get to every single question, but I think you can find this all online on LinkedIn if there's follow-up. Thanks again to Steve and Marion for having us, and enjoy the rest of the Media Lab Future Imperfect Conference.
It was an honor. Thanks, Micah.
Cheers.
Thanks, Micah.
Thanks, Micah. Great to be with you all. Thanks for joining.
Awesome.
Bye, everyone.